Hello silver friends, this is Jolie from 𝐒𝐨𝐴 and today we're going to get into why you should be picking your products based on hair texture, hair density, and hair porosity. This is part 4 in my series on Simply Silver curls. However, if you have straight hair, stick around because this information applies to you as well. And for silver hair, this is the information that I found that helped me crack the code on how to care for my silver hair. It helped me reduce frizz, it helped me increase shine, it helped me increase definition to the waves that I do have, and it helped me with the overall health of my hair. I have a lot of notes here, so I will be looking down at my notes, and I encourage you to grab a notebook and start taking notes as I go through this. It is a lot of information. You might want to bookmark this video and come back to it. And please remember that everything I discuss in this video will have links down below in the description box because I have blog posts on hair type and porosity that will help you to further delve into this with more details. But grab your notebook, grab a cup of coffee, and let's get to it. First, let's get into density. Density is literally the amount of hair you have per square inch. So this is every strand per square inch. 2200 is about normal density. So the first test to see what your density is, if you're not going to count the strands, is to part your hair and look at your scalp. This test is particularly difficult for people with white hair because white hair can look like it's not there, and then it might make you think your hair is thinner than it actually is. When you do a scalp test, you pull your hair in your part and you look to see, can you see your scalp? You might want to use a magnifying mirror for this so you can actually see how much scalp is visible. If a lot of your scalp is visible in your part, then you have thin hair. If hardly any of your scalp is visible, then you have medium to normal density hair. If your scalp is virtually invisible when you part your hair, then you have thick or high density hair. Another test is the ponytail test, which I find to be the most beneficial, especially if you have the white hair issue where it might look like your hair is thinner than it actually is. So basically, you take your hair, you put it in a ponytail, and you take that measurement. The instructions are below in my hair type post. In that post is detailed instructions on doing the ponytail test. But the results are, if you have 2 inches or less in your ponytail, then you have low density or thin hair. If you have 2 inches or more, then you have normal density hair. If you have 4 inches or more, then you have high density hair. What does that mean when you're picking products? Well, density when you're picking products can be beneficial to think about butters and oils here, because if you're using heavy butters like shea butter and coconut oil and cocoa butter, these butters can be too heavy if you have thin hair. It can weigh your hair down and make your hair look thinner and greasier. Hair volumizing mousses and volumizing sprays are very helpful for thinning hair because it gives the appearance that you have more hair than you do. Fortunately, if you have medium to normal density hair, you don't really have to worry too much about volume, and you may not have to worry too much about products weighing you down, but you do want to find a proper balance. You don't want products that are too heavy, and you don't want products that are too light, because too light and your hair will get too big, and too heavy your hair will be flat and lifeless. If you have high density hair, you may really prefer these butters like cocoa butter, coconut oil, shea butter, so forth, because they are a little heavier. They do kind of weigh the hair down, and they'll keep your hair from getting bigger as the day goes on. Now, some people like the big hair look, but you still want it to stay inside the style range that you started with for the day. You don't want it to be growing, so to speak, as the day goes on and getting bigger and bigger. So you may find that stronghold gels are probably a really good friend for you if you have curly hair, because it'll hold that style in place and lock it in. And the stronghold gel will also block out humidity from making your hair grow and get frizzy and get bigger as the day goes on. Next up is hair texture. Hair texture is what many people refer to as fine or coarse. Hair texture is literally the diameter of the individual strand of your hair. So if you take a strand of hair, let's just do this together, and it's real easy. Just take one strand of hair, which it's very hard for me to get a hold of one. Okay, so you take one strand of hair in between your fingers, close your eyes, and roll that strand around in between your fingers. Just rub your fingers together. Can you feel that strand of hair? If you can barely feel it or not feel it at all, then you have fine hair. If you can kind of feel it and you know that it's there, you probably have normal hair. If you have a feeling of it being very substantial and feeling like thread almost, then you have coarse hair. So what does this mean for products? There is a list of things here that I find to be very crucial advice depending on whether you have fine or normal hair or coarse hair. Fine to normal hair doesn't like to hold a style well, but can be gently coaxed. Fine hair often needs protein moisture balanced products to provide strength. Fine hair is prone to frizz, especially around the crown, creating that halo effect. This is where I struggle because I do have fine hair, and because fine hair tends to break easier with that not having that protein moisture balance. You can have broken hair around this area, the crown or the halo, and that is where you will see the most frizz, and it can be rather troublesome because it can often be on the canopy of the hair. Fine hair is often sensitive to certain ingredients in hair care products like heavy silicones, which will weigh your hair down and cause buildup rapidly. So if you have fine hair and you are using silicones, you might want to try going silicone free to see how well your hair responds to that, or lighten the load. Use lighter products, use less heavier oils and butters and so forth to keep your hair from getting that weighed down greasy look and making it look finer. Lighter oils would be sunflower, almond, argan, squalane, refined jojoba, and grapeseed. This does better for fine hair types. If you have silver hair, I would stick to squalane oil because it is 100% clear. When you are washing fine hair, co-washing may be the worst possible thing for fine hair because you are leaving a coating of that co-wash and conditioner on your hair, and you may find that a low poo, no sulfate shampoo works better for washing your hair. Coarse hair actually holds the style really well because it has that benefit of texture. That's why for fine and normal hair, using a texturizing spray can be beneficial for volume and hold because you're adding a little bit of that texture to the hair, and coarse hair already naturally contains that texture and has that added benefit. Coarse hair, when dry, can become frizzy, brittle, stiff, and easily break. Think about a really dry piece of straw. It can just snap in half if you bend it. So you want to make sure that you have all the moisture your hair can handle. You don't want to go overboard, of course, but you want to be moisture focused on coarse hair. You also want to make sure you're using a really good sealing hold product like a curl cream with a little bit of hold in it, and a gel or a hard hold gel where you seal in all that conditioning that you have given your hair and allow your style to set, and it will help with keeping your hair for a longer period of time, meaning you can extend your wash days. Heavier butters and oils and silicones can be very good for coarse hair because it helps to coat the strand, make it flexible, and seal in the moisture that your hair needs. Co-washing and conditioner washing are excellent for coarse hair because you are providing extra moisture for your hair and you are allowing your hair to remain flexible and have movement to it and not allowing it to get brittle, dry, and stiff. The next thing that I get asked the most frequently in curly hair consultations is about porosity. I'm sure that's why you're really here, is to learn about porosity and understand how to test for it, what it is, and how to deal with it. So first, let's go over a couple of things about porosity. If you look up porosity on the internet, the definition is how well your hair absorbs and retains moisture. That is only part of the story. However, I'm not sure where porosity became vitally important to curly hair. However, I would say that it easily translates into how dry your hair is, or as 𝐜𝐨𝐿, the person who actually defined this for hair colorists, put it, it is how damaged your hair is. Her definition is, in hair coloring terms, when we speak of porosity, we are actually discussing the structural integrity of the hair. This is the condition a hair colorist will evaluate when you sit in their chair for chemical treatments. They are looking at whether or not your hair can withstand heavy process like bleach or permanence. So this is where, if you have a good colorist, they can tell how high your porosity is. Really high porosity is probably very bleached hair. Low porosity is probably what everyone has on their hair for maybe the first 2 inches of hair or so, depending on whether or not you naturally have a little bit higher porosity growing out of your scalp, just the way it grows. So there are beliefs that there is no such thing as natural high porosity hair. I can attest to that being false because I have clients who have silver hair, no damage, and their hair is very high porosity. So let me show you a little, example of what we're talking about. What is porosity as a visual cue? I'm going to show you some pine cones, and these are going to represent how the cuticle should look based on the porosity. Low porosity hair is a smooth cuticle. It is undamaged. It is protecting the hair shaft, and it is well hydrated. So you can see this represents a smooth cuticle. You can see how the petals are very close together and laying down on each other. Okay. So medium porosity hair is maybe slightly damaged. Maybe it's just environmental damage. Moderate protection to the hair strand, and it has a healthy moisture level with a slightly raised cuticle. So this is going to show you what a medium porosity looks like. You can see the cuticle's a little bit raised. And high porosity is likely very damaged, like I said, with bleach. It is unprotected. It's not protecting the hair strand, so it's considered unprotected. And it has a usually dry appearance with a rough cuticle, and it needs moisture. So this pine cone is representing high porosity. So you can see it's just the hair strand would be kind of flayed open and vulnerable. 𝐜𝐴's original process was to grade porosity 1 to 5. I like this because it's a little bit more than low, medium, and high, right? You can have low, low, medium, 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 high, and high. And basically what that gives us is a little bit more room into not feeling so stressed over high porosity, because I think high porosity really is very damaged hair. But you can have medium to high porosity where your hair does dry out quickly and it is harder to deal with keeping moisture in balance. What changes the hair porosity? First is length and age. The older your hair is, like the ends of my hair being probably 5 years old or more, can change the porosity of your hair. So for instance, my hair, because it is so long, I'm probably low porosity in this zone and medium porosity in this zone. The other things that can change your porosity are extended exposure to sun and other environmental factors like wind, dry climates, if you horseback ride or motorcycle ride. All of those things create friction and can cause the porosity to go up. Any chemical treatments like permanents, relaxers, hair dye, bleach, highlights, that all can raise the porosity of your hair. And bleach is probably the worst damage, of course, and causes the highest porosity hair once your hair has been bleached. Other things that can create porosity changes are heat tools. If you're using your heat tools too high, that will damage the cuticle and cause the porosity of the hair to go up. Let's talk about testing the porosity of your hair. You can send your hair off to a lab to have it tested. I think some of those labs have closed now, probably during 2020. But if I find one, I'll link it in the description box below. If you don't want to send it off for a test, the first thing you want to do is clarify your hair, and do this with your hair clarified and dry. The float test, which many of us have seen, is putting your hair in a cup of water and seeing if it floats or sinks. The problem with this test is it's very fallible. First, you would have to break the surface tension of the water, and most people aren't going to do that with a single strand of hair. Especially if you have fine hair, it could float just because it's fine. So I say scratch the float test, don't even bother trying it, because I have tried it with certain hair types, expecting it to give me a specific result, knowing what I knew about what this person had told me about their hair, and it didn't work at all. The test I find to be most effective for seeing what porosity your hair, what range of porosity your hair is in, is a fine mist test. So basically, when your hair is shampooed and clean, and dry, no conditioners, no gels, no oils or anything like that in it, you take a fine mist bottle like this, the ones that have the misty continuous spray, and you spray this on your hair. If it dews up and creates drops, you have low porosity hair. If it soaks straight in, you have high porosity hair. If it takes a second or two before the water actually soaks into the hair strand, then you likely have medium porosity hair. But let me show you with a little example. So this is a coated card. It has a, film coat on it that makes it smooth. And I'm going to spray, and you can see the water just dripping off. Okay, this is an index card that has no coating on it, and the water just soaks right in. This is just an ordinary paper towel, and I will spray it, and the water just soaked directly in, no dripping, no nothing. So you can try that out at home yourself just to see what I'm talking about. But that's a really good way to think about porosity. Porosity is, tightly closed cuticle, creating a very protective coating on the hair, whereas a high porosity hair is very open like the paper towel and just immediately soaks up the water. So now that I've gotten everything wet on my desk, let's talk about pH and porosity. The higher your porosity, the higher your pH, which means that you need to focus on conditioning. Conditioners lower the porosity of the hair down to its normal range. So this is really important to focus on if you have high porosity hair. You want to make sure you're using pH balanced products, because if you aren't, the balance of your hair will get thrown off, and it will make your hair frizzier, it will make your hair harder to deal with, it will make it drier, it will cause fairy knots. Fairy knots are a very good indicator that you do not have a pH balance in your hair. I have a post listed below in the description box on pH. There is a little bit of pH included in the porosity post, but I have a full post, ultimate guide to pH and hair. And in those posts, both of them have a pH scale, so you can see where everything should fall naturally and what happens to it if you alter it with certain substances. So also in the description box below is a list of porosity charts. Low porosity chart, a medium porosity chart, and high porosity chart. There are links below to the PDFs that I've created that give you some pointers on how to deal with your porosity, kind of a general thing. You can print all three of them so you can see the differences between them, but I'm going to go over some of the high points on those charts now with you. So with low porosity hair cleansing, you want to use a sulfate-free low poo shampoo, because if you're co-washing low porosity hair, you may find that it gets a buildup really quickly, and that you probably won't care for how that feels on your hair strand. Low porosity hair should be probably clarified about once a week, depending on how often you wash your hair. I just go with whenever it feels like it just has too much buildup on it and I need to clarify. Conditioning low porosity hair, you want to make sure your conditioner is actually soaking in. So you don't want something that is too buttery again or too heavy in oils, because those oils will sit on top of the hair and not actually soak in. Also, when you're deep conditioning low porosity hair, you want to try to use heat if you can, because the heat will help open the cuticle and drive that deep conditioning moisture in. Leave-in for low porosity hair should be something that actually penetrates the hair and gets into your hair. You probably don't need much protein here. You want to focus on moisture. Some people with low porosity hair get away with using liquidier leave-ins like sprays and milks. I have not found that to work for my low porosity hair, but some people do find it to work, so you can always try and see. Using a dab of your regular conditioner can also work, so you may not need a leave-in at all. Low porosity hair prefers hydration over protein, so you want to be really careful because low porosity hair can be sensitive to protein overload. I would say avoid protein in all of your products. You might need it in one product, especially like in the wintertime when you need to add a little bit of texture, a little bit of strength to your hair to help it with the cold, dry air. If you want to use proteins on low porosity hair, I would focus on looking at proteins like amino acids, because they are a smaller protein for that smaller cuticle that is tighter. Be careful again with heavy oils and butters and overusing products. You don't want to put too much product on your hair because it will weigh it down. And if you have fine low porosity hair, if you use too heavy of a product, you probably already know this, it can go straight if you have waves or curls, and it can just feel very weighed down. It can feel very greasy, and it can feel like there's a coating on your hair, and that's not really what you're going for. So medium to hard hold gels work well on low porosity hair. This is something I would say you have to kind of play with, because some hair types are very against gel, like they just don't like gel no matter what your hair type is, and some hair types have to have a hard hold gel to help hold the style. In my case, because my hair is very soft and low porosity, I like a hard hold gel because it helps to set the curl in place. I think of it like, you know, your grandmother going to the hair salon and getting her hair rolled and set. The setting process was very important to how long that hairstyle lasted. So dry time. Low porosity hair can take up to 2 hours to dry. That's a good indicator, aside from the mist test, that you have low porosity hair. Low porosity hair, it just takes a really long time to dry. Some people with low porosity hair, their hair can take up to 4 to 5 hours to dry, and I would highly recommend that you do not air dry your hair if you have that long of a dry time, because your hair basically gets waterlogged and it gets water damage, and you don't want to do that to your hair. Moving on to medium porosity hair, low poo shampoos work well. Co-washes can work sometimes. You might find that alternating back and forth is the best option for you. Of course, sulfate-free shampoo is my go-to. I always suggest sulfate-free shampoo no matter what your hair type is. But anyway, clarify about every 2 weeks. You're just going to want to, play with that depending on if you're using silicones or not. If you are using silicones regularly, you want to make sure that you're clarifying so you don't get a buildup of silicones on your hair. You want balanced conditioner between moisture and protein, because your hair is a, kind of more balanced porosity. It's not too low and it's not too high. You don't want to have too much conditioning and not enough protein, and you don't want to have too much protein with not enough conditioning. You want to have a nice balanced product. For leave-in, a thin curl cream probably will work really well. Again, a balanced product, something that is well balanced between moisture and protein. You may also find that amino acids work better for you, or smaller proteins. I have an ingredients post. I'll list that below so you can see what the different proteins are and choose accordingly. For medium porosity hair, medium to hard hold gels are also going to be good for you. I don't think a light hold gel will help you with silver hair. So there are a lot of people with medium porosity that do use light hold gels. You might just want to play with that, because if you have silver hair, your cuticle is slightly raised. It's kind of a personal preference there. The most recommended thing for medium porosity hair is a medium to hard hold gel. Your dry time is relatively normal, so this is where if you have never understood why people say it takes forever for their hair to dry or their hair dries instantly, you probably have normal porosity hair because your hair is drying in a normal time frame. Moving on to high porosity hair. High porosity hair does well with co-washing for cleansing because it needs that extra moisture. So that's great if you can handle co-wash, especially on your scalp and everything. Go for co-washing for high porosity hair and get all that moisture that you can get from every step of your routine. Clarifying high porosity hair, I would stick to maybe once a month with clarifying your hair and use a low poo sulfate-free clarifying shampoo so you don't just strip your high porosity hair. With high porosity hair, you want to deep condition frequently. I would say up to once a week is great. If you need more than that, just be careful to not over moisturize your hair. You don't want it to become too soft. If you find that your hair feels too soft and too limp, that's a sign that you have too much moisture in your hair. The other side of that is with high porosity hair, you're gonna need a little bit more protein to help fill in that cuticle. And so you may find that a protein-rich conditioner or a protein-rich deep conditioner is highly beneficial to you. Same as your leave-ins. This is where most people with high porosity hair can use a curl cream that's a little heavier, that has maybe some shea butter or coconut oil in it. It just depends on how well you apply it and whether you're applying it on soaking wet hair or damp hair as to how your hair responds to that kind of a heavier leave-in. Play with it, see what works for you. But make sure that you're getting that moisture that the high porosity hair demands. This is where I kind of feel like in previous time before we had the word porosity, we were actually talking about dry hair. Where hair could be very, very dry. So high porosity hair has a propensity to be very dry. You want to make sure that you are getting enough protein across the board in your products. Your hair may like proteins in everything. Your hair is particularly sensitive to heat and humidity, so you want a gel that has heat and humidity control in it. 𝐜𝐸 is the go-to on that one. They have a heat and humidity control gel, which is the preferred and favorite, and works very well for high porosity hair. You want to make sure that whatever gel or creams you're using actually seal the cuticle. You may find that you want to end your styling with an oil. That would be, coating your hair with an oil when you do your scrunch out the crunch. That way, all of the moisture that you have put in your hair is sealed into your hair strands. The dry time for high porosity hair can be very interesting. You can have flash drying in the shower where your hair is drying even between steps. Like you shampoo your hair, you rinse it, it starts drying, you put conditioner in it, you rinse it, it starts drying. So that can be very high porosity hair. Generally, on the higher side just means that your hair soaks up water very quickly, like the paper towel did, and it dries pretty quickly. You probably can get away with air drying your hair and not needing any heat from your hair dryer at all. You can probably use the cool setting if you want to diffuse your hair and not use any heat whatsoever. And I would highly suggest that you do that if you have higher porosity hair, just so you aren't zapping your hair with heat and creating a higher porosity issue. Okay, so that was a lot to cover. If you have any questions, remember I am going to do a Q&A in the Silver Curls series, so please leave your questions in the description box below. If you are interested in learning more about hair type, if you need the ponytail test, if you need ingredients, if you need pH information or porosity information, all of those posts will be linked below. Also below is a link to my email list. Please sign up for my emails so you know when my content drops. That's the best way to stay in touch with me and learn about everything new with Quicksilver Hair and me and my channel and my website. If you liked this video and you found it helpful, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to my channel already, please do so now because I would love to see you next time. And until then, shine on.